Hey folks, Josh here, and you might know me as the steward of Rugged Ridge Forest, where we craft wood-fired, organic, pure Vermont maple syrup. You can try some for yourself by heading on over to ruggedridgeforest.com. The subject of this video is heavier than our usual content. There was an accident while spreading manure with Hugo and Hildy. Everyone is uninjured and back to work, but I wanted to share with you all the lessons I learned from this harrowing experience. This video took so long because I was nervous to share. YouTube can be a critical place, and it's tough for a learning horseman to share the good with the bad. But ultimately, I found it more valuable to share what not to do as it is to share what to do. I continue to invite criticism in the comments, but please be kind and constructive. Most of this video was shot before the accident. This is Hugo and Hildy's second year spreading manure together. They were both doing great, smooth, safe, and calm. I was genuinely proud of them leading up to the accident, and I still am. And just to reiterate, Hugo, Hildy, and myself are all fine today, and thankfully weren't harmed in the accident, though we could have been. Hildy is an 11-year-old standard-bred Percheron cross who pulled for the Amish her first 8 years of life. She has a fast, strong, beautiful trot that she prefers for covering ground and working earnestly. She is also a bit spookier than Hugo, and has bolted on me before when I was in my early education as a horseman. As a 4-year-old standard-bred Percheron cross, Hugo is very different. Though bought from the Amish, I have broke him entirely myself. He's kicked to start, and when things get funny, he's more apt to stand and await orders than to tear off or panic. I can't help but wonder what influenced their different yet complementary demeanors. Their first day of spreading this season went great. They were smooth and steady. We focused on pulling strongly at a walk in hopes of developing muscle and control in both horses, especially Hugo. It's actually harder to pull at a walk, but the low gear is important in draft work. They did great, and I doubled their alfalfa rations as a reward for a great day's work. In retrospect, the double grain could have lifted their blood sugar and contributed to the accident the next day. The second day started off much like the first, but Hugo had developed a bit of confidence. To be honest, I was proud of him. Maybe he was feeling the sugar from the doubled alfalfa, but he had a bit more bounce in his step and a touch of snap in the collar. Hugo was pulling ahead for once. After spreading some manure on the flats, I decided I wanted to spread some manure out on the hillside to try to thicken the grass up there. The hill is visible just above the flats of the field. I pointed the team up the hill with a full spreader and then spun them around. Our turn was tight because there were a couple of chicken tractors in the field from this summer's batch of meat birds. The horses turned around a little bit erratically, so I stopped them, facing down the hill. I then said, "Ready?" and Hugo hit the collar hard while facing down the hill. Hildy, a half step behind, went straight into the gallop to catch up. Hugo matched her gait, and within 3 strides we were off. I tried to whoa them, gently at first, but now the manure spreader sounded like a machine gun rattling behind us. I leaned into their bits harder, but manure was getting flung towards the team, smacking their butts like a whip. I tried to whoa them, nearly shouting over the beating of the spreader, and I could tell Hugo wanted to stop, but Hildy was spooked. I leaned straight back on the lines, pulling all of my strength into their 3-piece snaffle bits. When I realized I couldn't stop them, I tried to turn them into a loop. They were pointing right at the open gate, and if they went out that gate, they would have had 1/8 of a mile of curvy downhill driveway before they merged up with the main road in 50-mile-an-hour traffic. I tried to turn them into a loop and keep them in the field, but they wouldn't respond. They only edged just barely off course. We must have been going 35 miles per hour. My hat blew off my head. It felt like the fastest I've ever been on a horse. We were heading straight towards the cedar fence posts, and here I was, clinging to 2 out-of-control horses, with several hundred pounds of cart and manure barreling behind me. I made the call to bail before we hit the fence. I wasn't proud of my choice, but I had done all I could to rein them in, and it was out of my hands. I jumped off the forecart, and they crashed into the fence. After crashing, they were both down, but then they both got up and continued their bolt up and over the hill, towards the logging roads and away from traffic. I heard the manure spreader clanging behind them as they went up the hill, and things eventually fell silent with a clank as they tangled up in some trees. I had bunged my knee up bad enough that I was moving slow. I wouldn't have ran after them even if I could have. Running would only get them more excited and bolting again, so I calmly walked towards the last place I had heard them. When I came upon him, Hildy was wrapped up tight against a tree in her harness, and Hugo was down on his side, tangled up all tight. I took out my camera, partly because I thought there might be something to learn here, and also because I was intentionally moving very slow so as not to spook them. So grabbing the camera wasn't going to slow me down in helping the horses. Here is that video.
Stay down, big guy. Stay down. Stay down. It's okay.
The camera stopped recording when a blade of grass brushed the record button. But thankfully, everything and everyone was all right. Hugo was down, and I spoke to him soothingly, trying to calm him. He lay there perfectly still as he trusted me to unclasp his harness. He didn't thrash, he barely flinched, and even after the whole harness was laying beside him, he lay still. I had to coax him into standing. Thankfully, he stood right up and went straight to eating grass. It was a tremendous relief. I then unharnessed Hildy, who I could tell was confused, or dare I say, ashamed, of her response and where it had gotten her. Kit, who was helping me in the loader, came up, and we led the horses down, not a drop of blood or a limp between them. I was euphoric with relief that we had all survived relatively unscathed. Walking up to the scene, I was prepared for the worst, and I couldn't believe that after all that, they were both walking smoothly, and thankfully I had taken the worst of it. I gave them 2 weeks off. I had to order replacement parts for their harnesses. They had ripped the biothane driving lines. They had tore the nylon with the force of the bits in their mouths. Their evener was bent, and the fenders of the cart were tacoed and needed to be hammered flat. But thankfully, everything could be fixed, and the team was unscathed. Up until this point, I had believed in using a 3-piece snaffle bit while driving my horses, in order to be gentle on their mouths. After having put all of my weight against those bits and being unable to stop the team, I decided that a Liverpool bit would be better for driving. The Liverpool offers drop rings, which afford the driver a bit more leverage when handling the horses. I will still continue to release all pressure while driving, but when the manure hits the beaters and I need more leverage to get the horses to listen, I believe the Liverpool will provide that. I can still be gentle and considerate, even with the additional leverage. And when I'm riding, I can still utilize a snaffle bit. It's only when you're pulling on 2 horses that the extra leverage might be required. After 2 weeks, we hitched back up and finished the job, going through the process of training like it was our first time. First taking out just the forecart, then the forecart and the spreader, then engaging the spreader, and finally using the spreader to spread manure. While I avoided the hill that was our undoing, I wanted to make sure we got back on the horse and weren't afraid of what we'd been through. We finished the job a little bit wiser and relieved to have this year's manure spread and to all be in one piece. I'm sorry that I exposed my horses to that situation, but farming is dangerous, and farming with horses is dangerous, and quite simply, life is dangerous. I want to be as good of a horseman as I can be, but none of us truly know where the line is until we cross it. I will be doing more work to reinforce the wool on my team. I will continue to work on our trust, and hopefully train them to be the safest that they can be. But these things can and do happen, and any horse person that's been doing it long enough can attest. Thank you all for your support, and I hope that this story helps you all to consider some dangers that you might not have previously considered, and that it makes you safer going forward.